Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on external identities, modernization, security, and user experience for modern digital services delivery. I'm Nikhil Chahare, Director with Edgile. For today's webinar, I will be joined by my colleagues Frank Bruce and Justin Willoughby. We also have a guest speaker, David Switz, CISO, CTO at MVP Healthcare, who will be talking through the external identity transformation program at MVP Healthcare. Can we move on to the next slide? So now let's look through the agenda for today's webinar. We will start with a quick introduction on Edgile and who we are, and then begin the session with an overview of external identities management, what it means, how does the traditional architecture differ from the modern approach and methodology for account lifecycle management. Then we'll flow into the most important part of the webinar for our guest speaker, David Switz. We'll discuss the MVP case study and how they went about doing the transformation for the different types of external users who use MVP's digital services. This will be followed by a demo on MVP's live production member portal. We will cover the user sign-up, sign-in process and showcase the before and after on how MVP went about revolutionizing the end user journey for the member communities. Lastly, we'll cover the Edgile Quick Start program, talk through the objectives, discuss how you can start modernizing your external identity program in a matter of few weeks using Microsoft's Azure AD B2B, B2C, and we'll end the webinar with the Q&A section. Feel free to post your questions. As we go through the content, we go through your questions towards the end of the webinar. So let's get started. We move to the first slide. So who we are. Edgile is a national consulting practice with about 20 years of experience in security. We predominantly work across 3 practice areas, and most of our workforce members are Big Four alumni. Our first practice, identity and access management. We do strategy, implementation, end-to-end transformation programs for all your identity needs. We are a top delivery partner with SailPoint in this space. Our second practice, cloud security and information. This is focused a lot on your cloud journey and how we can help accelerate adoption of top security and world-class solutions. We partner with Microsoft in this space and help with the strategy implementation of any of the Microsoft's enterprise mobility and security solutions. And lastly, our integrated risk management practice line focuses on governance, risk, and compliance solutions. We are an elite ServiceNow partner in this space and help our clients build modern risk management programs. Overall, our strategy is to use strategy-first approach, offering a full suite of consulting services, and we specialize in highly regulated industries such as healthcare, financial services, and energy, retail. So let's move on to the next slide. So now let's begin with the external identity management overview section with understand what cloud security means. So what is cloud security? It's a new world. It's about harnessing the power of cloud analytics for early detection and action against threat. It's how you implement your policy, controls, and services to protect data, application, infrastructure from threats. So with respect to external identity management, you can talk about security all day, but essentially it boils down to 2 things, authentication and authorization. Confirming users are who they say they are by associating an incoming request with a set of credentials, and authorization, the process of giving the user appropriate permission to access a specific resource or a function depending on different parameters like who they are, what are they requesting access to, from, and where they're getting the access from. So keeping these 2 things in mind, traditionally it's all about holding external user identity and credentials on premise. Same user might have multiple accounts and credentials to support different digital services offered by the company. If a user belongs to a partner firm and has access to the applications and services offered by a firm, there is no way to know if a user is still active unless there are robust processes built around it, and usually these are difficult to automate. It's a management burden to host these external accounts, credentials, the support services that come along with it, the security risk, and things like that. So there are repositories built over time, different username, different presentation layer, different user journeys for accessing resources and services offered by the company. It lacks consistent user experience across the different service portals, and there is a need to build a more efficient process to support the revenue-making business. You might be using an identity provider that's out of support, has security holes, very slow to adapt, and enable new services. It's very difficult to modernize. So overall, this has financial and security impact and restricts you from modernizing your services. So how does the modern approach differ from the traditional one? Microsoft's cloud-powered Azure AD B2B, B2C landscape enables an identity management service that controls how your customers sign up, sign in, manage their profiles using their iOS or Android devices and other applications. Your customers can use their preferred social, enterprise, or local identities to get single sign-on access to your applications, their APIs. It's capable of supporting millions of users and billions of authentications per day. You can enable MFA, conditional access policies, to control what a user can access depending on different security parameters, like the ones I mentioned above, like what you are, we're trying to access, where you're from, and make an informed decision if the access should be granted. It's essentially a managed service supported by Microsoft. They check for an incoming request against millions of signals for potential threats and take a more proactive approach. Microsoft holds the identities, the credentials, taking away the support, the admin overhead, and the management of these credentials. So less risk and audit and compliance issues. So the modern approach focuses on being more flexible and provide more customizable options, allowing single identity with multiple policies, allowing for fine-grained security controls. And lastly, the newer approach brings security and marketing teams together who want to revolutionize the end user experience by bringing in that modern and consistent secure approach, where possible, have single account for different applications or services offered by the company, and focus on a more secure and more consistent user experience for their customers. So now, to do a more technical deep dive into the traditional and modern architecture, I would like to invite my colleague Frank Drews to talk through the next set of slides. So Frank, over to you.
Great, thanks. Hello and good afternoon. I'm Frank Drews. I'm a senior architect with Edgile, and I specialize in identity architecture. And I've recently been working on some Microsoft B2B and B2C external identity projects. These projects have solved some of the most complex business challenges in consumer identity we've encountered to date. And I'm really excited to share you with some of the features provided in the Microsoft Azure B2C product and discuss what a typical application architecture will look like before and after a move to a cloud-hosted B2C identity platform. And we'll be discussing a lot of the features of Azure. So on the next slide, we're going to take a look at a typical approach, which has all the components hosted in your own environment. And that could be on-premise, right, in your data center, or potentially even like a lift and shift to a cloud hosting provider, but with the identity components still being managed by you. So you're still managing those. So even if your infrastructure is cloud hosted, you still own the identity platform, and you're responsible for things like procuring software and licensing, capacity management, making sure you have enough servers and disk storage and network, so on, patches, security fixes, upgrades, so on and so forth. Now, when you move to an identity as a service, in a service model, then these are managed by your provider, in this case, Microsoft. So you're always on the latest and most secure version of the platform, and the capacity management is no longer a concern. It's a lot like your electricity bill, right? So you can consume as much or as little as you need. So whether you're scaling up to meet unexpected demand or even seasonal demand, think of like a tax preparation company. The stuff they're doing, in the first part of the year up to April 15th, massive amounts of user sign in. But, come December, it's pretty quiet. So, building to meet the fluctuating demands is something really well kind of suited for, a hosted cloud type thing. In some case, you may decide that you want to downsize, or even find that something you were launching didn't work out and you need to sunset it. And you only need to pay for what you use, and you don't have any long-term commitments in either hardware, software, or network capacity. So those are some of the challenges of running the whole thing yourself. So now on the next slide, let's switch over and take a look at a typical identity as a service, in this case, Azure B2C architecture. One of the first things you'll notice is that the B2c Identity Infrastructure is separate from the application that you're hosting. And because B2C uses modern authentication protocols such as OAuth, OpenIDC, and SAML, the authentication services don't have to be located in the same place as the application. So this allows you flexibility to move your application and data to whatever location works best for you while keeping your identity infrastructure in the cloud. We even have customers who have applications that are entirely internal but still use a cloud authentication. So lots of flexibility in there. The next thing inside that B2C box is there's a whole series of services that I've listed as being included in the platform. Many people who have implemented their on-prem identity really haven't gone much beyond a username, a password, and maybe some attributes about a user. But with this B2C platform, you're getting a lot of extra services that would either be difficult or sometimes even impossible to implement yourself on when you're managing the entire system. And also, one of the nice things is Microsoft releases new capabilities and features, you get to use them immediately, right? Unlike an on-prem system where you have to schedule an upgrade to move to a new version, so on and so forth. So with all the different features that are in there, it's really going to be impossible to go into real detail just in the few minutes we have. But there's a few important ones that I've kind of listed in the diagram, the 6 there, and in no particular order. With the boxes, let's talk first. And as was mentioned before, in my mind, the most important ones are the security features, right? Even non-technical people understand that cybersecurity breaches are on the rise, and they're a real and present danger to online services that everybody's come to depend on, right? So Microsoft, they invest over $1 billion, B billion annually building security into all of their technologies, like their Azure identity. They operate a cyber defense operations center, a 24/7 cybersecurity and defense service with real security experts in data sciences, the kind of people that you can only find these sort of organizations that around the clock are protecting, detecting, and responding to threats to their infrastructure. So these people are working around the clock to make sure that security is applied, across all of their capabilities. A lot of these features are really behind-the-scene things that you really never see. They're detecting things like known exploited hosts, IP ranges, bad actor activities, to keep you secure. And this type of globally aware security service involves signals gathered, all across the world by multiple organizations, not just Microsoft. Something that no enterprise, could hope to replicate, right? It's just, a capability that just comes with the platform that would be almost impossible for you to do. In addition, there are things that you can configure, things like conditional access, which kind of like it sounds, allows access under certain conditions. And these conditions can be, your type of device, your location, and a lot of other parameters to enforce rules such as, I may require a multi-factor, I may deny you access, or other type things. And part of what you get with Azure B2C is a multi-factor authentication system via SMS or Authenticator app. And as I'll mention later, through partnerships Microsoft has with ISVs, you can even implement more B2C compatible advanced MFA offerings. Another box you'll see there is, I kind of abbreviate as BYOI, or Bring Your Own Identity. We find most of our customers are deploying this. And what that really means is the ability to allow users to bring their own identity. And those can be really kind of 2 types, either like a corporate managed, think like an Office 365 tenant, or a corporate owned federation thing like ADFS, Okta, Ping, et cetera, standards compliant federation tools. Or you can have user managed identities. And by that, I mean social identities. Think Google, Yahoo, Facebook, et cetera. And these integration capabilities are just built right into the product. All you really need is just select the ones that you want and do some minor configuration. Another box pointing out is rich user interface. Now, most of the people that are traditionally managing identity are IT people, while the real customers for these services are often sales, marketing, and product group teams. And their interest, security is important to us, but their big interest in all these identity operations is really through the lens of corporate branding and adherence, sometimes to very strict visual guidelines. And the ability to customize B2C screens using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can meet these very exacting UI requirements. And also the user journeys, as we call them in B2C, the experience that the user has can have complex branching and conditional execution paths, letting you build some really rich user, sign up and sign in experiences. In addition to interacting with that data that you've stored in B2C, you can reach out to externally, either on-prem or cloud sources, to interact with data in line of business systems like your customer loyalty system, customer relationship management systems. And you'll see some of these capabilities when we do this demo later. Another item that I thought was important to point out was compliance frameworks. And Azure has more compliance certifications than any of the other cloud providers. So B2C, as well as the other offerings, are certified complying with a pretty big collection of frameworks. And you can see all those details online. There's global ones like ISO 9001, U.S. and foreign government items like FedRAMP, ITAR, and industry certifications like HIPAA, FERPA, and PCI. Of course, it is important to understand that compliance status for the framework doesn't automatically translate to certification of your solution. You're ultimately responsible for making sure that compliance with the framework is done, but the underlying service that you're going to be using from Microsoft is already compliant, and that's important. Another box I'll point out was third-party integrations. While Microsoft, gives you a pretty rich set of capabilities, they certainly don't provide everything. So, in addition to the functionality provided in the base product, Microsoft has formed partnerships currently with about 17 ISVs that add values such as identity verification and proofing, some advanced MFA and passwordless authentication methods, role-based access, and fraud protection. And most of these products can be purchased in the Azure Marketplace and built together with your other Azure services. So you can purchase them all from one location and have your billing all kind of rolled in. So this kind of leads to the next slide. So the next slide is really taking the items I just talked about and putting them in the form of like use cases or problem statements. And then on the right side, just a whole bunch of boxes identifying some of those product capabilities we talked about. Again, I can spend all kinds of time diving into each one. And if you go back and look at the recording, you can maybe eyeball some of those, or even better, let's have a one-on-one discussion with you to see how these capabilities, are appropriate and we can put to use in your environment. As kind of a last point, I'd like to mention that most customers find that they can purchase B2C services far more economically than they can do even basic services themselves. So the pricing is based on not the number of users in the directory, like most products are licensed, but the number of active users in a particular month. In addition, the first 50,000 users per month are included at no cost, and additional users are available at less than a penny per user. As with most Microsoft products, a conversation with the Microsoft licensing specialist will, help sort it all out. One of our favorite phrases is, "I'm not a licensing specialist," so we can connect with people who are. So again, just kind of, some more little boxes that describe some of the features I talked about. And as much as I'm sure you're just enjoying, this technologist droning on about, all these features, feeds, and capabilities, I'm going to turn the meeting over to a real authority, and that's David Switz. He's the CTO and CISO at MVP Healthcare, who's recently been through this and completed a journey from a traditional customer identity system to B2C. So David, over to you.
Frank, I appreciate the introduction. Thanks for folks attending. Hopefully I can give you some insight into our journey and kind of talk a little bit about advanced authentication. It was a pretty exciting journey to go on. And if you go to the next slide, Justin, I'll give a quick introduction about MVP. So MVP is basically a healthcare insurance payer in upstate New York. We have a geography of Buffalo, Western New York, Central New York is Syracuse and Utica. Upstate is considered the Albany area, downstate to Tarrytown, which is just north of New York City. And we also have offices in Vermont and service about 700,000 members. And we have about close to 1,800 employees now, and a number of different, as you can imagine, healthcare benefit plans. And you can also imagine that the churn that experienced over the last year with COVID and how that impacted the insurance agency in healthcare. Next slide. So before we get into the legacy of the provider, let me talk a little bit about the legacy of MVP. I've been here just a little bit over 3.5 years. I came from a provider side. I worked in a hospital for a number of years, technology, doing lots of the same things. When I got here, the technology from a hardware perspective was incredibly antiquated. Network switches couldn't be on SmartNet because they were too old. Servers were 9, 10, 11 years old. Lots of Microsoft 2003 servers, XP, also Windows 7, and we made a migration to Windows 10 in the whole process. But really a very antiquated environment, not just from the hardware layer, but if you go up to the application layer and the data layers, all very antiquated, older SQL environments. The identity and access management solution was a solution that was implemented in 2008. And as Nikhil pointed out in one of his previous slides, that creates all kinds of issues, from high cost of maintenance to supportability to security risk to all kinds of support issues from our team. And so right about the time I got here, in January of 2018, we started a project to evaluate a number of different solutions that were out there, because our infrastructure was so old in terms of this authentication process, and the maintenance that was required was incredibly large. And as Frank pointed out, one of the other issues is because it was so antiquated and old, it took forever to just authenticate in the process, let alone start to then transfer information from our claim system. So as an insurance company, what you need to know is important are claims. And different from a provider where you've got health records and health information, on the payer side, what's important are those claims and getting those claims what they call adjudicated and processed. And so providers will look at those claims and evaluate different things based on that claim, see how it was paid, things of that nature. And so these four constituents over on the right are really who we deal with. We deal with members, we deal with providers, we deal with brokers. So brokers are just like you've got insurance brokers. They're out there and they're selling our different plans to federal government agencies, state government agencies, local businesses, nationwide businesses, and things of that nature. So you've got brokers that are selling plans, and then you've got employers who could be buying direct as well. And so each of those people have different access points into our core claims systems. And as you can imagine, with a system that was built in 2008 and 2018, 10 years later, the speed at which it processed requests was really, really cumbersomely slow. On top of that, when you look at our web application, our mobile application versus our web application, the rating on our mobile application, I think, was 1.8. So not a lot of high kind of, visibility and success with either the mobile app or the web app because of the legacy code that existed. And it's voluminous. It's not inconsequential. It's very, very significant. And so if you go to the next slide, Justin, we can go down to the next step. And I'll talk about this last bullet because I saw it in the previous slide, the multi-factor authentication. We are governed by a number of state agencies and their requirements, as well as a number of federal agencies and their requirements. And one of the requirements certainly is multi-factor authentication. And in that old solution, there was just no way to provide for multi-factor, and we needed to find a new way. And so we started this new journey when I first got here to uncover a new way to do identity. And what I should say is that our CIO is very much an advocate of Microsoft and Microsoft technologies. And our feeling is we should start with Microsoft first before we go outside, because we wanted to keep a kind of a single stack. And if we could get Microsoft solutions to drive our technologies, that was where we wanted to go. And as a last resort, we would look to other vendors. And as Frank pointed out, as we start to expand this, there are a number of other ISVs that are out there that we can pull in and really enhance the feature functionality if we choose to, because of the integration with other vendors that are out there, third-party vendors. But for right now, we're really focused in on the Azure B2C components. And what we did was we looked around at a number of different vendors, and because Microsoft is such a good partner of ours, they recommended, I think it was 3 vendors to help us kind of start the journey with a POC. And we brought them in, and it was right as I started, and we ended up selecting Edgile. And we talked through all our requirements, and as you can imagine, you've got those 4 constituency groups: members, providers, brokers, and employers, and each of them has a little bit of a different requirement. But we didn't want to fundamentally change, as Frank pointed out, that UI. We wanted the UIs to be very, very consistent across those constituency groups, as well as when we start to roll this out internally for our own staff. We want that interface to look and feel very similar and have that standardized look and feel. So that was a huge requirement for us. And when you look and you go back into the slide deck, the 6 use cases that Frank pointed out, I think are very, very viable, and they were 6 of ours that we kind of had to have. So we wanted a similar look and feel. We wanted newer technology. And I think one of the things that Frank pointed out that is very important is the scalability. I don't want to have to deal with buying new hardware and buying new software and more licensing and more of this and more of that. The B2C piece and the Azure environment is exactly as he projected it. It's utility. It's electricity, and the more we use, the more we pay. The less we use, the less we pay. And we do have a very cyclical business as a payer, and that cyclical business is at open enrollment times. And in most cases, with the exception of this year because of COVID and what the president's done in terms of open enrollment really never stopped. But largely, open enrollment starts in October and goes through about the March timeframe, with heavy peak usages at calendar year end and in January. So we will see higher utilizations in those periods than we would at this time of year in June, for example. So we wanted to be able to scale and move accordingly with the cyclical business kind of sojourn that we've got. So that was another requirement. Clearly, we wanted to be able to support multi-factor, and we wanted it to be consistent. And you'll see this in the demonstration that Justin will go through. And just as a point of reference, Justin is actually still working with us and is on our project as we continue to evolve our identity and access program. So he's really the brains, not me. So what you'll see is it's a very consistent look and feel, but it also integrates today with the social media pieces and parts that are out there, whether it's Google or Facebook or things of that nature, and you'll actually see that. So the goal was to create this proof of concept, see if this B2C process could work, and develop then kind of a back of the napkin budget and timeline to submit as a business case, which we did, and we went down that path. And the good news is we're very quickly coming to the end of those 4 constituent groups. We did the brokers first, and then there were a number of different things that went off, and we ended up doing a number of different things, two of the pieces of the constituents in parallel together. So the project got a little hectic at times because there were multiple paths and streams going through it. but effectively we wanted to align our rollouts with a number of other projects that were happening at the same time. So in the last box in the lower right hand corner, the phased rollout for different entities also aligned with our mobile strategy redesign that we were working on, and some of the web changes that we were working on. So Jason's been, or Judd, has been working with our web teams to be able to go through and make that alignment and plug that code in. Justin has been. I should know that. That's my son's name. Next slide. So what you see here, and this first bullet is really kind of a lessons learned for folks out there. 700K accounts migrated from a legacy solution to Microsoft Azure B2C. What do I do with all this data? I've got all these old accounts out there. How do I get it into the new format? How do I make, and Frank touched on this a little bit too, is how do I make this solution better for my end user with less work, right? So I've got all this old data, old information. Oh, by the way, for those who may be in businesses where you send out billing statements, stock statements, householding, right? The householding concept. We had a householding concept where Dave Switz could have an email that my wife used, my son used, and everybody under the sun could use to access that information. And now we were requiring a single account for a single person. And so how did we go through that and deal with that? There were a lot of accounts that were migrated. In some cases, we considered, do we just set up new accounts and have them set up those new accounts and go in there? And on the member side, that's what we ended up doing. And I just did mine. I think we migrated, what was it, just in last week. We did the member pieces, and I did my account Friday night, I think it was. And I had to use my same email, but I then had to go and set up my new account. So that's a real consideration for any business, for any line of business, is what do I do with the old data that people have been using for a whole bunch of years. The cost savings are pretty astounding when you look at software that isn't supported or is running out of support over time. So, as things get older, they charge more, and the support gets less. And so, with the new stuff coming through, the cost savings using Microsoft's solution surprisingly were less costly, and there was some ROI to be had. Bring your own identity. I think Frank touched upon that. That this is really cool stuff, and you can see in the right hand corner, Justin's got the screen up, and you can see the links, and he'll show this with Facebook and Apple and Google connectors that we built into that. And we changed the entire UI. The UI, as you see, is very kind of refreshing and new. But yet that UI is the same UI used across those constituent members that we talked about earlier. And as the bullet says about application modernization, it really helped and was at a great kind of juncture for us, because we were redesigning the web and redesigning our mobile app at the same time, and we were able to kind of converge those work streams collectively together. And then we can use the MFA, satisfy the state and the feds, and go on our merry way. So it's not something to be taken lightly. It's not something that you can do in 2 or 3 months. It takes a lot of thought, takes a lot of effort, a lot of planning. Once you get on that journey and get through the planning, though, it's pretty exciting to watch it uncover. I watched a lot of the sprint work that folks worked on, and Justin showing it as it kind of evolved. And I think that's also the beauty of an agile environment. Edgile worked with us in our agile environment, and you got to see the thing very quickly start to evolve and take shape. And before you knew it, what you see in the upper right hand corner or on the right side of the slide is exactly what we have implemented today. And I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Justin. He's going to give us a little bit of a demo.
So before Justin goes in, does the demo, I just want to thank you, Dave, for walking through the external identity transformation journey at MVP. All the information you shared was very insightful. Hearing all the issues and the compliance obligations and how MVP went about the transformation journey, very extremely valuable for the audience, and we really appreciate this partnership. So,
and that's the other thing to point out is that there are highs and lows in these projects, and there are challenges, as you can imagine, because this is not a 2 or 3 month initiative. This is a pretty substantial undertaking, and I'm not getting paid, so take that as you will. But the Edgile team has really been a team, and Justin has worked not as a consultant or a contractor. He really has been an extension of our team. And I know personally, and I do talk with the folks who are on this project, that they look at Justin and his other team members as kind of MVP employees, and they work very, very collaboratively together. And I don't think we would have been as successful had we not had that relationship and that partnership. So, kudos to this team, because they did a great job.
Thank you again, Dave. Appreciate it. So we're gonna go into the next segment, which is the demo. So it just lines up nicely, where Justin is gonna take over and do the demo of the member portal for the MVP's production environment. So I'll hand it off to Justin, and have you talk through the use cases we'll be covering for the demo portion. So Justin, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you, Dave. So like Nikhil said, I have the pleasure of showing you what we've been working on at MVP Healthcare and demonstrating that to you. So my name is Justin Willoughby. I'm a senior consultant with Edgile, and like Dave said, I've been working with them for the last year or so on this transformation, and it's been exceptional. So I'm very excited to show you what we've got today and show you how streamlined and modern they approach this. So I will just show you a quick before and after, and then kind of explain the use case scenario that I'm going to go over. Then we'll jump into the demo. Okay, so as you see on your screen here, so on the left-hand side, we have a before picture, and on the right-hand side, we have an after, like you saw on the screen before. So on the left-hand side, we have a username and password field. This all exists on the MVP main web page. And in today's world, these turn into links that link off to B2C, and then B2C handles everything for you. It handles the identity, handles the authentication, the password reset, the registration, all self-service, all within a very modern, streamlined, best practices approach. Okay, so today I'm going to be showing you a use case of a brand new MVP member. So someone who just started doing business with MVP Healthcare, just got their MVP ID card in the mail. So they know their member ID and everything like that. They want to log into the portal. So they need to go through a registration so that they can view their ID card, their claims, make payments, etc. Okay, so I will jump into the demo now so we can see that. All right, so you'll see me here in the browser now, and we're looking at MVP's main web page. And like I said on the previous slide here, we've got a couple links now as opposed to those sign-in portions for username and password. And these links are no longer on the page. They're no longer utilizing different services like the old legacy system. Now they're just linking off to B2C, and B2C is handling everything in terms of the identity side. And then at the very end, once B2C gets it validates the user, it's going to kick it back to MVP systems, giving a token with user information, authorization information back to the portal so that it can do what it needs to do. The person can log in and utilize its functionality. Okay, so like I said, the scenario is going to be a new MVP member going through registration. So I'm going to click on the create new account. Actually, I want to show you the sign-in page here first. So let's jump into the sign-in. Just so you can see what we've built out here in terms of sign-in. We'll come back to this at the end of the demo, but just want to make sure to show this out because it has all of the advanced capabilities that Dave talked about. The sign-in with these federated accounts, Google, Apple, Facebook, and then also this really cool secure link feature that we have, which is a passwordless sign-in, where it's going to email you a secure link. You can click on the link, and then it logs you into the portal, which is really cool. Okay, so I am a new member. I'm going to register now. Right here, I'm going to select what type of MVP member constituent I am. Am I just a regular MVP healthcare plan enrollee? Am I part of Child Health Plus? Am I a non-member, which is basically just someone who is maybe part of an employer-sponsored health plan? They don't have a member ID, but they still need access to the portal for certain things. I am a regular MVP member, so I'm going to click on this. First thing we're doing is collecting a validated email for this person. So we want to see who's this person behind the keyboard. Do they own the email that they're about ready to create the account for? Okay, so for the purposes of this demo, I'll just use my Edgile email. Okay. And this is going to send a one-time passcode to my email, which I'm then going to type into this box, validating that I do own that account. And one thing to note here is we're actually utilizing an API call here to send off the email, and it's an MVP email API, so they can completely control the look and feel of that email template. And that was something that was very important for them. It's not coming from a Microsoft email address. They're not controlling the template, but MVP is, and it's coming from an MVP email address. Okay, so let me open this up here. All right. Next step, now that I validated this person controls this email, let's accept some terms and conditions here. And you cannot accept until you scroll down and check the box. Okay. Now that we've done the validated email, we've accepted the terms and conditions, let's validate that the person behind the keyboard actually deserves to have a member account, that they are an MVP member. To do that, I need to enter some details about myself. So what is my member ID, first name, last name, date of birth? So I have those saved over here. Okay, and what's going to happen when I click this button is it's actually going to make a REST API call and validate this information against MVP's system of record, just so it can make sure that, yes, this is a valid member that we do have in our system. They have entered all the details correctly. They're allowed to create an account and have access to the portal. Okay, so these flows are completely customizable to make them as streamlined and complex and efficient as you want. So we're going to click continue here, validating that information against the backend system, allowing me to create the account. And you'll see these OTP codes, one-time passcodes, the MFA options littered throughout a lot of these different flows. And what's really cool is there's like no cost to these. So you get the benefits of MFA without any cost. Same goes for Authenticator app as well, a more modern approach to doing MFA. So that's one big piece of the service that Dave and Frank touched on a little bit earlier. And then since we're on this page again, let me just assure everybody that this is test data that we're entering here. All synthetic data, no member data being exposed at all. Let's try this one more time. Excellent, that is what we expected to happen. Okay, great, so it did the validation against the API in the back end. It said this person is an MVP member in our system. Let's go ahead and let them continue the registration. Okay, so now I'm going to create a password here. Okay, and one thing to notice here, we do have some pretty complex criteria, and it's completely customizable on the B2C side. So you can have as many characters, symbols, uppercase, lowercase number that you want. And then we also have the ability to do some password history requirements. So if you don't want it to be something in your last 5 passwords, we can do that as well. So once I hit create here, this is the function that's actually going to create something in B2C with that validated email address, with that member data, with this new passwords. That way you can actually log on to the portal. So I'm going to hit create. Excellent. So once we hit this point, the person has been validated, they have a new account created within B2C, and they're able to log into the portal. But at the very tail end of this registration flow, we want to make sure that we give the user the opportunity to take advantage of some of the great benefits that B2C has to offer that these guys have already talked about throughout this demonstration here. So sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook, sign in with Apple. Makes it super efficient and super easy to log into the portal. So let's give them the option to link those. Okay, so for this demonstration, I'll go ahead and link a Facebook account. Okay, and what that's going to do is actually redirect off to Facebook. So this is a Facebook page, and I'm going to be using a Facebook test account here. Okay, and once I hit this button, Facebook's going to validate my credentials and then send back to B2C, a yes or no. Do we know who this person is? Are they a valid Facebook user? Should we allow them to log in? Okay. And then B2C can make a decision on what to do after that. So after they validate the information, send a token back to B2C. B2C is going to say, okay, great. We're going to link this Facebook account to this validated email address in B2C. So that way you can log in with both of them. And as you'll see here, with minimal changes to the application itself, we were able to kind of remove that old identity layer and transfer over to B2C. And now the portal is working, just fine here, just as expected. So this is me landing on the MVP Healthcare portal, where I can look at claims data, make a payment, do anything like that. Okay. So I will just quickly log out then, just to show you that the user's actually created. I'll hit a sign in here, go back to member, hit sign in, redirect me back to B2C, type in that information again. And it's as easy as that. Okay, so you'll see how easy it is to kind of string complex scenarios into one cohesive user flow that makes it, you get a lot of information and detail from your users, but the flow itself is not very difficult for them to follow. It's not very abrasive. Okay, so you'll see the registration process is very, very simple, and they were able to bootstrap their account very quickly and get logged into the portal. So this is what we've been developing at MVP Healthcare. I hope you enjoyed. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat, and we'll answer them at the end. But that's my time. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks for the demo. So what Justin just showed are complex transformations behind the scenes, and a lot of that was something that Dave spoke to as well. It takes a lot of effort. It's not just the technical integration, but the organizational change management transformation part of it. It's a high-touch program. If things are not implemented correctly, it can cause downtime on your revenue-making business. In the end, it has impact on your customers and how they log in and access your services. So how do you get started? What's applicable to you? So to answer a lot of these questions, Edgile has put together an external identities quick start program. The objectives of the quick start program is to build an execution plan and a roadmap for your external identity management journey, and establish technical reliability for your use cases using Microsoft's Azure B2B, B2C service. The program cover all different use cases that are applicable to your identity program. So as part of this quick start, we leverage the power of B2B, B2C to kind of build an identity experience that works for any user using any identity on any device. We review the UI UX needs for a portfolio of applications. We have a world-class UI UX team that will go through your app portfolio and how customers interact with your systems and provide recommendations, opportunities for improvement to provide that consistent look and feel and solutions that work for your brand. We demonstrate the Azure AD B2C capabilities in your tenant, the customer's tenant, where we touch upon a lot of these things that Justin just demoed, like the sign-up, sign-in process, how that can be streamlined for better user experience, the use of custom policies, demo on these policies can be implemented to kind of alter your sign-up and sign-in experience. So we have a lot of these pre-built packages ready to be deployed to build that strong baseline and show value quickly. The invitation process on how to build a strong and secure invitation process for new customers to sign up for your services. The bring your own identity strategy, I think Dave and Frank covered that pretty well. It's groundbreaking. It's a growing trend. So you don't have to manage the credentials. In most cases, the identity provider is a social media company like Facebook, Google, very similar to what we saw for the member portal. And single sign-on, MFA, application access experience. So if your application needs additional security controls like MFA, we have predefined workflows that can seamlessly integrate and can be demonstrated as part of this Quick Start program. Then discuss the user migration strategies from legacy identity provider to Azure platform. This one is one of the most challenging tasks in this whole process. How do you make sure that you have a strategy in place? What are the options, like just-in-time migration or have the users register again? The program will focus on providing the most appropriate user migration options that work best for your environment, your customers, and make it less impactful for your end users. Identify application integration patterns, focus on how apps can interact with your B2C service. So what are the high-level tasks and what does the timeline program framework look like for this Quick Start program? So can we have the next slide? So this program, it's a 6-week program. From concept to like a real field, it's just 6 weeks. We start with analysis and planning phase where we conduct interviews, discover your current state identity architecture, identify pain points, gaps, compliance issues, any other source of problems that you have with the current setup, review your UI UX needs, identify opportunities to improve the customer experience and how they interact with your application systems, align all your needs with your program goals, start exploring future state model, understand your user base, roles, authentication protocols, and used by the app portfolio. The second phase of this program framework focuses on configuring a sample B2C application, almost like a POC in your Azure tenant. So we come in, we configure an Azure AD B2C directory, register a sample browser application, demonstrate the user experience with out-of-the-box Microsoft capabilities, a lot of them that I spoke to on the previous slide. And this can be custom tailored to your needs. The third phase focuses on Azure Devops. So we configure Azure Devops to promote your B2C configuration as code into production tenant. So essentially what that means is having all the wiring in place to the point where you decide to move this sample after production, you have all the pipelines and things built out to migrate the code into production environment. So this is very unique to our service offering that we have for this 6-week program. And then the last phase, it focuses on the future state roadmap. As part of this phase, we create a future state identity conceptual diagram for your environment, build a plan for displacing your legacy IDP solution, discuss application integration patterns, user migration strategies, your plan for common branding across the digital estate. So essentially, the output of this is a 2-day planning workshop where we go through everything that's covered in this program and give you a well-defined execution plan, timeline, cost, activities, milestones, and things that you need to implement. Know everything about what you need to do in respect to modernizing your external identity program. So essentially, by the end of the program, you know exactly what you need to do, the processes, things you need to take care of, everything in just a matter of 6 weeks to demonstrate value. So with that, we now move into our last segment of this webinar, which is the Q&A section. So before we go through the questions, I just want to call out that if you need more details or want to connect on the Quick Start program or anything you want to know about how you can modernize your external identity program, please reach out to me at nikhil.chahari@edgile.com, or you can also contact Edgile at info@edgile.com. We have a strong team of business development professionals who are spread across nationally and can help connect you with the right set of folks to walk through the next steps. So let's dive into the questions for today's webinar. So let me quickly take a look at the panel. So I think we have a couple of questions. I think the first one is, what's the difference between B2B and B2C, and where would I use each one? So Frank, you want to take that one?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So actually, this is actually a really common question. I get this asked a lot. As a consultant, I get to use my favorite answer, well, it depends. But seriously, B2B and B2C share a number of similar characteristics, which makes kind of choosing the right tool a bit unclear at first, but here's some good general guidelines that I use. Azure B2B is really an extension of your existing Office 365 tenant, which contains your workforce users, typically synced in from Enterprise AD, and often trusted people from other Office 365 tenants, mostly, that you invite in to collaborate with, especially using Microsoft first-party apps like Office 365 SharePoint, or maybe some of your other enterprise apps. So it's really for your workforce and your closely trusted collaborators. Now, B2C, on the other hand, is really for your customers that consume your digital services, right? And these users typically either invite themselves through a self-service sign-up or via some sort of invitation that you send to them. And these users can have both locally managed usernames and passwords, or even better, bring their own identity from social identity providers. And the apps that they typically sign into are your custom applications for them, and not your apps like Office 365, which is important to say. Office 365 really can't be associated with B2C. And that's a really good reason for that, because we often see customers implement both solutions. In addition to other reasons, to prevent access to business systems like Office 365 from customers and suppliers. And I'm sure we all remember a recent case where a contractor account was used inappropriately accessing customer systems. But in this kind of separated model, since customers only exist in B2C, you've made it impossible to assign them access, whether innocently or nefariously. And in the case where your workforce actually needs to work inside of those customer-facing apps, you can use federation to let the employees have access to those customer systems without having to create yet another account. You just federate them together. So yeah, B2B, workforce, and closely trusted partners. B2C, all the people consuming your digital services, aka your customers. So that's the general delineation I explain to people between the two.
Thank you, Frank. I think we have a couple of minutes to take one more question. So what are the different user migration strategies that you have implemented for your customers? Justin, I think you're on the thick of this. You probably know better. So you want to take this question?
Sure, absolutely. So there are a lot of different models, and I'll kind of touch on three today. So the first one is, I would say, a pre-cutover model. So this is a model where you utilize your legacy identity system to still authenticate and authorize people, and then kind of shimmed in between that process, you kind of collect those credentials and then utilize either a script or an API or something like that to then bootstrap accounts in your B2C environment. So this way is it's non-abrasive because people are still utilizing the old system of authentication, authorization, just typing in their credentials as normal, and then we're creating B2C accounts for them so that when the day comes, whenever we do migrate over to B2C, their account's already created with the current password, and there's not much abrasion there. Two other models that we actually utilize in MVP Healthcare. One is, I would say, a just-in-time creation model, which is, all right, we're going to day one cut over to B2C with no accounts in the environment, and then we're going to allow people to log in with their old credentials, capture those, validate those against the old system, and then just in time create the person in B2C whenever we do validate those. And at this point, we can collect some additional data from people as well, which is one of the reasons that we actually went with this at MVP Healthcare, is after they enter their old credentials, it's kind of a non-abrasive thing, because they utilize their old credentials. We can validate that and then collect some additional details, like a validated email address or a new password, because we have new password criteria, or an MFA option. So all of that is included within that just-in-time migration process. And then lastly, another form of migration that we utilized in MVP Healthcare was a re-registration process. So this is really beneficial whenever you kind of just want a clean set of data. You don't want to kind of rely on the old legacy system at all, and you just want people to re-register. So that's what we ended up doing with the member constituent, is we're not going to take their old credentials in this case. We're just going to have them re-register their accounts by entering member details, as you saw today, a new validated email address. So that way we can still validate them on the back end that they can create an account, but we're collecting all new sets of data for them: new password, new email address, MFA options, etc. So those are the most common three migration strategies I would say I see used.
All right. Thank you, Justin. I know we are 1 minute past our scheduled time. Just cover the last slide. Move on to the next one. So if you enjoyed today's webinar, join our identity team on July 14th for our discussion and live demo on how SailPoint's Identity Now and Azure Active Directory can help your organization mitigate risk by securing your SaaS applications. We also have a webinar on July 28th covering the Azure Sentinel Managed Services. So any information you need or registration purposes, do visit edgile.com/webinars. Again, thank you again for joining today's webinar. We appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.